This is a 3x3 Pyraminx, or at least that's what I'm going to call it because it has 1, 2, 3 layers. But you could imagine what it would look like if we chopped off this bottom layer and turned it into a 2x2 Pyraminx. It'd basically be 4 of these tips around one central piece, and as you could imagine, it would be pretty useless with all 4 just turning in one direction. In fact, it would look something like this. Now, unfortunately, this isn't actually a real 2x2 Pyraminx, it's actually something called a Pyraminx, but you can imagine how silly this puzzle would be if it only turned around the tips. And stepping down one more time, this is a 1x1 Pyraminx. Its turning, or lack thereof, is pretty self-explanatory, and I actually just custom made this one so that I'd have a stickerless version. So now we have a 1x1 Pyraminx, a 2x2 Pyraminx, and a 3x3 Pyraminx, all in stickerless. So what comes next? Well, the 4x4 Pyraminx, of course. This one is made by Shengshao, and it's been around for quite a while. As you can see, we're stepping up the normal Pyraminx with now 1, 2, 3, 4 layers for quite a fun extra challenge. But do you really think I'm going to settle with an old stickered 4x4 Pyraminx when the rest of my collection is in stickerless? Of course not. Plus, Shengshao doesn't even make a 5x5 Pyraminx, so where would we go from there? That is where YuXin comes in today. If you don't know, YuXin is known for taking already mass-produced puzzles and making way better versions of them, like the recent YuXin Gigaminx, which is now by far the best on the market. And that's why I was so excited when I saw that YuXin had made not only a new stickerless 4x4 Pyraminx, but also a 5x5 one. Of course, they didn't invent either of these puzzles. Even the 5x5 has been around for a long time with the Mefferts one, but if I know anything about the brands Mefferts and YuXin, I know that this one is going to turn a lot better. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's start off by unboxing the YuXin 4x4 Pyraminx. As you can see on the box, it says Speed Cube, also Speed Cube, and Speed Cube. Now, if you've never tried a 4x4 Pyraminx, I would say it's more than just a novelty. It's actually one of the more fun non-WCA puzzles out there, and would possibly make a good candidate for a new WCA puzzle. It looks like the only accessory it comes with is this instruction booklet. I haven't touched one of these for quite a while, but I think I remember how to solve it, so we shouldn't be needing that. I would say it looks really nice with the stickerless outside and black inside, kind of that look that Gan popularized. The stickerless shades look pretty nice, very similar to this other YuXin Pyraminx that I have. The logo sticker is removable, which is great, and the plastic finish is kind of matte, not quite as glossy as this one, but also not quite frosted. And interestingly, you can see that the size of this puzzle isn't that much bigger than a normal Pyraminx, and that combined with these really nice rounded edges means that this puzzle is actually a lot more comfortable to hold in your hands than the much bigger and pointier Shengshao 4x4 Pyraminx. But of course, there still is one more big thing we need to try out, the turning. So let's do some first turns here, and that actually strikes me as a little bit slow, a little bit stiff. Honestly, I am a little bit underwhelmed by the turning. I guess it just feels dry, like it needs some lube. So I guess let's go ahead and add some and see what happens. Okay, that was a bit of a help, but it definitely didn't fix everything. I would say that calling this a speed cube is a bit of a stretch, just because the backwards corner cutting is pretty much non-existent. If a layer isn't quite aligned, the rest of the cube is not turning. And without corner cutting, that means you can't really have the fast fluid turns as you would have on a real speed cube. And that is a little bit disappointing. But don't leave just yet, because there is actually something that I really like about the turning of this one compared to the Shengshao, and that is the clicking mechanism. As you can see, each time you finish a turn, it perfectly clicks into place on all of the layers. Now, this isn't using magnets or even ball bearings. I think it's literally just one piece of plastic clicking into another, but it still is much superior to the Shengshao version, which has no alignment mechanism at all, so you have to make sure to manually align each layer after each turn. Now, you could argue that the raw turning alone is actually a little bit better on the Shengshao, but I think with the alignment mechanism and just the better form factor, I would probably rather use the YuXin. You still have to slow down and make sure the puzzle is aligned after each turn, but because the puzzle is helping you do that alignment, I'm going to give it a slight edge over the Shengshao. Anyway, it looks like we're scrambling up the cube now, so let's go ahead and try out a quick solve. Now, I don't think I've solved one of these in over a year, so let's see if I remember how to do it. Of course, there is one step that I do remember, and that is solving the tips. That was pretty easy. And I think the next thing that I normally do is take a look at these center pieces here and these edge pieces here and kind of solve it like a Pyraminx. So for example, this would be solved relative to each other. So I've created my V here, just doing some basic L4E. So now let's insert this edge at the back like this, and then figure out what case we have. This, I believe, is the annoying one where we have to do this. And then hopefully, yeah, all the inner pieces will be solved. So now we have to deal with all these little outer edge pieces. So what I like to do is find an easy one like this that goes into its correct spot with just one move. And then we move that out of the way, undo the first turn, and then undo the second turn. Another way we can do that is like with this one. So we can move it into the correct spot, move it away, back, and back to solve that one. Sometimes it starts to get a little bit tricky, like having to do setup moves to avoid messing up stuff that we've done already, but eventually everything just sort of falls into place, which is very satisfying. Now, of course, we still have these 3 centers left over, and I definitely just had to look up my own tutorial to realize that I did this wrong, but with a fancy algorithm like this, we can go ahead and solve it. So yeah, that went pretty well, aside from the part that I totally forgot. And overall, the YuXin Master Pyraminx, I'm not super impressed with the turning, but in a lot of other ways, it is a nice little upgrade. Anyway, let's move on to unboxing the 5x5 Pyraminx, which I'm very excited about because I've never tried one of these before. Interestingly, the box is a lot fancier, but they make no claims about it being a speed cube this time. So let's go ahead and get this 5x5 triangle cube opened up. There we go. That looks awesome. No other accessories in the box, just the cube. And this thing, on the one hand, strikes me as really big, but I guess if you compare it to like the 4x4 Pyraminx, it's really not that much bigger. It's just sort of puffed out into a pillowed shape. I guess that makes it a little bit easier to hold in your hands and to turn. And yeah, everything else I said about the stickerless design on the 4x4 also holds true for this one. So let's jump right into the turning. Again, I've never turned a 5x5 Pyraminx before, so this should be pretty interesting. Of course, the tips themselves do move, which looks hilarious, turning just one tiny part of such a massive puzzle. The next layer down, and the next one, and the next one. That is a lot of layers. Funnily enough, this one actually strikes me as having slightly better turning than the 4x4 did. It feels like it has a little bit of factory lube inside, which probably helps. And just doing some turns like this, it feels a lot more fluid than the 4x4. Wow, out of the 2 of them, this might actually be the speed cube, despite what the box says. Yeah, this one is legitimately just a lot more fluid with better corner cutting, so that combined with the clicking mechanism, which is also on this cube, just makes for a much better turning puzzle. So yeah, YuXin really messed with my expectations here. I was expecting the 4x4 to be a great speed cube, then the 5x5 to be kind of meh, but in reality, it was the exact opposite. And the really exciting thing is that I still have never solved one of these. For all I know, it could be just as easy as a 4x4 or way harder. So let's go ahead and get it scrambled up here and see what it takes to solve. All right, let's try this out. Now there is one thing on this cube that I definitely do know how to solve, and that is the tips. But once we do those, I'm going to be a little bit lost for how to proceed. I have a feeling that these outer edges are going to be just like the ones on the 4x4, and so in addition to these pieces, I think all of these outer edges will be very easy to solve at the very end, so we can ignore those for now. So for the first step, I have a feeling that we want to solve these inner edges relative to these sort of corner pieces. I think that'll be pretty easy. It's just these center pieces that are kind of scaring me. But let's try it. Okay, I think I said what I was going to do there. That wasn't too hard. I can also solve these very inner center pieces by just doing this a few times. There we go. Now I think the tricky part is going to be these outer centers. Once I figured those out, I think I can solve the rest of it really easily. But until then, yeah, I'm kind of just stuck. I'm going to mess around with it for a little bit. Okay, after like 15 minutes of messing around, I finally figured it out. I'll leave that step as an exercise for the viewer. It wasn't that hard. Basically, it just involved a lot of R, U, R prime U, and some setup moves. So now let's work on all these outer edges, which I'm sure will be identical to the 4x4 Pyraminx. So for example, we put one into place, move out of the way, back, and that's solved. And here we go. That wasn't too hard. And now I have a feeling these very outer edges should be very easy as well. So we should just be able to do something like this to solve that one. I guess we can do this, which sort of solves them. And then we have these 2 flipped, and maybe just the normal Pyraminx algorithm will work. Let's try it. And there we go. The 5x5 Pyraminx is solved. So yeah, this was one of the most fun puzzles I've solved in a long time because it was challenging, but also just simple enough that I was able to figure it out. Like I was saying before, the 4x4 is a really fun puzzle. If you have the skills to solve a Pyraminx, you can probably figure out how to solve this one. And if you figure out how to solve this one, you can probably figure out the 5x5 as well. It's just a really fun lineup of puzzles all around. Now the 4x4 comes in at $13, which is slightly cheaper than the Shengshao. So I definitely recommend this one over the Shengshao with its slightly nicer turning. There is also a Qi one, which I haven't tried out. It's a little bit more expensive, but the turning might be a little bit better. Now the 5x5 Pyraminx is a lot more expensive at $33, but it is a much better puzzle, a bigger puzzle, and I think I'd recommend it more highly than the 4x4, even despite the price. And of course, you can't forget just how nice these puzzles look. The stickerless with black insides is just a really nice design. So I'll put links to where you can buy either of them down below at thecubicle.com. And as always, you can use discount code Z3Cubing for 5% off anything there. So coming back to how we started the video, this is my finished stickerless Pyraminx collection. I mean, one of them is kind of pretending to be something it isn't, but you know what? It looks very nice. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this look at 2 new Pyraminx puzzles from YuXin. One of them is kind of meh, but the other one is pretty great. But that's pretty much it for this video, and I'll see you guys next time.